And that was SOS.
And that was Sly Elsewhere.
And this is a special Halloween edition of The Apocalypse Bros. This story was sent in by The Supplier and is titled Tower Trials. When one wanders alone, they usually wonder if they are, in fact, alone. I am one who wanders. It comes with the business. What business, you may ask? Well, I'm a salesman, a traveling one, peddling my wares across the land. All sorts of knickknacks, items of my creation. Some days it's food from hunts that I'm successful in, and some days it's parts for pieces of machinery after finding an old rusted one and rummaging through its mechanical innards for fragments and such that might be for use for someone else. I travel alone. Oddly enough, from my experience, a lot less can go wrong when you're out on your own than with a group or even with a pair. See, when you're on your own, the only person you have to worry about is yourself. You don't have to worry about the safety of another person, and you don't have to fear them betraying you or even just making a dumb decision that puts you both in danger. And eventually they will make a dumb decision. In my line of work, you see that all people are like old steel. They may seem strong on the outside, but time and these conditions corrode them from the inside, till eventually they snap. And when someone snaps, there's no telling what could happen next. Me, I like to know what's coming. I like to know what the choices I make are, and that they're my own. And if it lands me in trouble, it was my own fault, and I deserve what I get. I don't want the consequences of others to be my downfall. Is that selfish of me? Maybe. But it also means I don't want to put others in danger based on my actions. And that seems like the opposite of selfish, in my opinion. But that feeling that amidst the deep quiet all around you, there could be anyone sitting and just watching as you pass by, and you never even know that they were there. Well, that feeling is what corrodes me from the inside. It wears on my sanity. The thought that, for no fault of my own, someone could just sneak up behind me and... A dark room. Never a place you want to wake up in. I stretch. My body aches. I must have been here for a bit because my bones practically creak from the reposition. My foot hits a hard stop as I attempt to stretch out my stiff muscles. I reach back to attempt to lift myself up and my hands hit a similar barrier. I feel around myself. Bars on all sides. Where am I? I'm able to sit up and slowly attempt to stand, and impact meets my head and pain shoots through my whole body. I didn't hit the top of whatever box I was in hard, but there's a massive bruise from the spot where my assailant knocked me out. I crouch into a ball and hiss with pain as I lightly touch it with my hand. No blood, just pain. Damn, that stings. I'll have to be careful about that. As my eyes adjust to the dark, a blinking red light about 2 feet ahead of me illuminates a small space around it. I can just see the bars in front of my face, enough to bring me to a sense of enlightenment. I'm in a cage. Probably a bad sign. Not too many good reasons a person would knock another person out and then lock him in a large animal cage, after all. As I blink past the pain of the bright red light blinking just a short distance from my face, I can see that just below the ruby glow is a button. A green button, I think. But it's hard to tell against the red light. I try to look around the rest of the room, but I can't make anything out that's further than a couple of feet from the blinking illumination. I guess there's no other option, I think to myself as I reach my aching arm out towards the button. There's a small click as I press it, and the roof to my cage slowly begins to lift. Well, that was easy. I nearly chuckle as I pull myself through the opening and into the openness of space that I still cannot see. As I stand, I note that it must be a reasonably sized room. I can stand up fully and my arms are able to spread out fully as well. It's a strange feeling standing in an unknown room of just blackness with no knowledge of what it is or could be around you. That annoying feeling of being watched was still in the back of my mind. Someone could be in this very room staring at me, watching me as I awkwardly struggled out of that cage, wondering what I'm going to do next. I can't see anything, which presents a problem. I'm not going to just wander around blindly in the dark. That's how you step off an edge and fall to your death. or walk into a sharp object, or bump an unstable structure that collapses on you. I practically leap out of my skin as some sort of alarm or foghorn sound, which causes me to fall backwards onto the cage that was, not long ago, my prison.
24.
An almost mechanical voice calls out, seemingly male. Then back to silence. Strange, I speculate. It didn't sound quite mechanical, like someone attempting to mimic a computerized voice but not quite getting it right. Also, what the heck does 24 mean? Aside from being the number after 23 and before 25. Why did that alarm sound? And for God's sake, where the heck am I? I sniff the air. Nothing to note. I fully extend both arms and swing them in all directions. Nothing. I crouch down and feel the ground below me, slowly taking small movements until I feel something. A shelf, maybe? I slowly and cautiously bring my hands up, touching each layer of what seems to be some sort of furniture. Nothing in the first section. Nothing on the second section. I'm standing up at this point as I reach the third, and my hand touches something. I quickly retract, waiting for something to happen, but nothing happens. I reach back over and touch the spot again. It's solid, made of metal, feels like an elongated cylinder, followed by an almost bulbous end. My sensory memory recognizes the shape. It's a flashlight. Oddly, exactly what I needed. I grip it and pray for power as I click the button. A light bursts forth and brings a smile to my face. It's a powerful light. Illuminates the entire force of the room as I observe my surroundings. 4 walls, it seems. Looks like some sort of storage room based on the bunch of desks piled up on one end. An old tube TV sits on one of those portable carts. There's the shelf from which I pulled the flashlight from. It now sits empty, although seems to be void of dust. Another thing to note. I turn the light behind me and see a blank wall, nothing special there. But as I lower the beam, I'm greeted by a slightly nerve-wracking sight, a drop where an elevator would normally sit. But now it's just an opening into a deep chasm. I slowly make my way towards it and look down. And the beam of light that I hold can't even reach the bottom. If I'd boldly walked that way, I could have easily met my doom. I sigh a breath of relief as I start to look around for the exit to this room. As I continue to hover my light around the room, it comes to rest upon another familiar feature, an exit sign hanging from the top of the wall, just visible past the stack of desks. Its normal glow has long since been discontinued by the years of unpowered post-apocalyptic world we've all gotten used to, but an exit sign typically symbolizes an exit. I can't quite make out the door from amidst the many desks stacked up upon each other, but I have to assume it's my only way out, especially since it's obvious I won't be taking the elevator. There's a loud noise from somewhere nearby. I'm not sure what it could have been, but it sounded like a number of large things collapsed. I wonder for a moment, there must be someone else here. More than likely the person that knocked me out. I need to be careful they don't catch me a second time. Again, that damn alarm. I breathe deeply as I try to slow my heart rate from the jump scare.
23.
That voice again. What does it mean? Although curious, I remind myself that escaping the room is my main priority. Finding answers can come afterwards. I make my way over to the stack of desks and analyze my situation. The furniture is packed in a rather precarious way. A single misstep or unwanted bump could bring one or more of the heavy-looking desks down on top of me. Not a particularly desirable way to go, but hey, what way is? Climbing over them is absolutely out of the question, which also removes the possibility of trying to get around them. They're packed to the wall, and I'd have to go up in order to go around. I shine the flashlight underneath. The openings of the desks seem to be connected, almost like some sort of maze. Seems like my only option, I think, as I get down on my knees and start to crawl through the first opening. I've never been particularly bothered by claustrophobic situations. I can handle small spaces better than most, so I don't panic. I don't rush. I just accept that this is where I am, and I focus on leaving as I make my way forward. So far, so good. The openings of the desks seem to be connected, as if this was the route I was supposed to take. I make a mental note of that. I round the final corner and find that there's about a foot's width of open space surrounding the door. I carefully stand up, making sure not to press against the desk as I do. I may have made it through safely, but a loud noise could alert the captor, and that's the last thing I needed. I find myself standing in front of a metal door, One of those where it has a push handle as opposed to a typical turn handle. Thank goodness, too. The last thing I'd want to find after all that trouble is a locked door where I can't get out. And of course, exit doors don't typically have locks. It'd be illegal after all. I carefully press it, not opening it more than a fraction so that I can take a peek outside. Light greets my eyes, causing a moment of blindness. I blink through the pain as best as I can. Within a second or two, I'm able to make out my surroundings. It looks like some sort of typical cement stairwell. Nothing but railing that leads downstairs and stairs of themselves, of course. To my right, on the same wall I'm on, seems to be another door. I look to my left, just stairs. I slowly make my way out of the dark room where I started and creep up to the other door on my right. This entry, unlike my own, does have a turn handle, but the only problem is it's been removed from my side. I lightly press against the door, but it holds firm. Someone doesn't want me to go in this room. Only option left is to take the stairs down then, I suppose. I look over the railing, nothing and no one underneath me. At least, not to the next floor. The stairwell definitely seems to go quite a ways down. I can barely make out the bottom, many floors below me. I creep down the cement stairs, careful that my footsteps don't make too much noise.
22.
Damn, that is annoying.
21.
2 in a row. What does that mean? I try to ignore these questions as I continue to step down the stairs. As I reach the next floor, I'm greeted by a door featuring a window through which you can see into the next room. I peek inside and quickly jump away, taking cover behind the wall. Someone was in there. I could see them walking around, clear as day. I process the image in my head. It looked like a male, fairly large, but his back was turned towards me, so he must not have seen me. I turn my head, and with the corner of my eye, I peek through again. Sure enough, the individual has his back turned towards me, so I observe. He could be the one who knocked me out and brought me here, so it's best not to just walk right up to him and say hi. As I watch him, I realize he seems lost. He's wandering around the hallway featured past the door I'm peering through as if he's unfamiliar with the place. He looks scared. I notice that there's a large spot on the back of his head, a bruise. He must be in the same predicament as me, brought here against his will. I observe for a few moments more, just to see what he attempts to do. The hallway he's in is fairly long. It starts and ends narrowly, but has a center section that opens up with what seems to be rows of doors on either side. The man inside has just reached the set of doors. I watch as he walks up to one as if to test if it's not locked. He grabs the handle and seems to almost freeze up. I squint to look closer and notice that he's subtly shaking, almost violently vibrating. His cheeks puff up with air, and I notice that frost saliva is building up around the corners of his mouth. What is happening? I burst through the door and rush towards the man, intent on stopping whatever invisible force was causing him harm. He slowly and seemingly painfully turns his head to look at me before finally letting go of the door and collapsing on the ground. I rush to his side and grab his hand. I'm immediately greeted by a brief electrical shock, similar to when someone rubs their feet on fuzzy carpet and touches something metal. I flinch with the pain and reach down to touch him again. This time I go for the side of the neck. No pulse.
20.
The voice calls out again. Thankfully, my heart is already racing, so the unexpected alarm doesn't cause me to jump like it had previously. My brain starts to connect the pieces of the puzzle. The crash I heard earlier, and the man's death followed by the alarm, and the announcement seems to suggest that every alarm signifies someone's death, possibly? The number? Maybe how many people are still alive? What kind of sick game is this? Whatever the case, there are 20 other people in the building, and I should try to find them. Maybe they'll have the answers. I stand up and make my way to the other end of the hallway. I reach the door there and find a similar situation to the door I saw upstairs. The handle's been removed from this side of the door. No way to get through there from my side. I slam myself into the door in hopes that I can force it open, but to no avail. Whoever put all this together really put some thought into it. I sit for a minute and thought, the only way out must be through one of those closed doors. This was another test. But which door is safe? And how would I be able to figure it out? Based on the man's built-up static and the way he died, I can only assume that he died by electrocution. I'd have to find another way to test each handle to determine whether or not they're charged. A thought comes to me, pre-apocalypse. I remember a time when I was at a friend's house. His family raised goats, and they were very curious, and to keep them from escaping their enclosure, they set up an electrical wire fence. My friend tricked me into touching a blade of grass to it, which I was greeted by an unpleasant shock. But when he placed a blade of grass to it, it burned. I asked him how this was possible, and he said that dead grass didn't conduct electricity since there was no life-giving moisture left inside of it. I could recreate this with paper. I searched my pockets. Nothing. Completely empty aside from the flashlight I took from the dark room. I looked at the man laying before me and noticed that he had one too. I grabbed it and wondered if he had been put through the exact same scenario I was with the dark room and such. I was about to check his other pocket when I noticed an old business document laying on the ground. I looked around and noticed the floor was fairly littered with them, a feature of post-apocalyptic wasteland you tend to ignore because you become so used to seeing it. I grabbed a sheet, glanced at the barely readable contents of the page, some sort of account summary suggesting that I was trapped in some sort of tall office building. I crushed it and rolled it into an oblong roll of paper. I ignored the first door, the one that the man had tried. No point in testing something we already knew wasn't safe. Moving on to the second door, I pressed the paper against the handle and watched as a wisp of smoke escaped the page. No good. I tore off the burnt spot and moved on to the third door. The last of the ones on this side of the hallway. Same result. Turned to the other side of the hall.
19.
I wondered if I'd ever get used to that sound as my soul returned to my body. The fourth and fifth doors were both electrified. I moved to the sixth door, hopes high. I was feeling confident and was about to reach for the final door when I stopped. No point in doing something foolish. Instead, I tested it, just like all the others, and was instantly appreciative of my quick thinking as a burn started to form on the page. That could have been my one and only strike, I thought. Then I started to get frustrated. If every door was hot, then how was I supposed to get out? What kind of test just puts you in a dead no matter what situation? I walked over to the first door. Maybe after electrocuting the man, it overloaded the circuits and broke the connection. Nope, still hot. What was I supposed to do now?
18.
Another one down. Maybe the handles were a trap? I touched the door itself, which seemed to be wooden, with the paper, just to make sure. Nothing. I put my hand on it and tried to press. Nothing. I did this with all the doors. Same result. And then it hit me. What if the test wasn't about finding which door was safe? What if it was a test of capably opening the door, even though it wasn't safe? But that would mean touching the electrically charged handle. I could try to use the paper like an oven mitt and take hold of the handle and twist it open, but that could start the paper on fire, which wouldn't be ideal since it was in my hand. And on top of that, the electricity could transfer through the paper and electrocute me anyways. I needed a substance that didn't conduct electricity. I know rubber is a great insulant, but where was I going to get rubber? I looked down at the man lying beneath me, and my eyes wandered until I noticed his shoes. Shoes! That was it. The bottoms of shoes are made of rubber. I reached down and started taking them off. You're not going to need these anymore, friend, I whispered. Something about hearing your own voice after so much time in pretty much deafening silence is sort of surreal. It almost feels like the words aren't coming from your own mouth. I finished removing his sneakers. The removal greeted me with an unpleasant scent of feet and BO. No time to complain about the smell, I thought as I slipped them over my hands. Approaching the first door and awkwardly fumbling with the knob, sure enough, I didn't feel any electricity as the rubber bottoms absorbed the electricity and kept me safe. After a couple of tries, I determined this door was locked. Slight sense of dread crept into my mind as I thought about the possibility that they all might be locked, on top of being electrically charged.
17.
The voice chimed out. Something about the constant reminder of death kept me on edge and made me want to move faster. I knew that would only lead to potential carelessness and tried to maintain focus on what I was doing. I moved to the next door. Locked. I moved to the third door. Click. I could feel the handle turn further than the others, and the door began to give way. I pushed it open the rest of the way and was greeted by another room, a dark room. I slipped the shoe off my right hand and reached into my pocket to take out the flashlight and clicked it on. It was some sort of custodial closet, very small. I could tell that there was no door out of it, other than the one I was standing in, of course. What the heck? Where was I supposed to go now? Then I noticed it. Although there were shelves and even a desk inside, they were completely void of tools and cleaning supplies. At first I wondered if it had been looted, until I noticed that there was something on the desk, at the very far end of the room, a walkie-talkie. I approached it, dropping the left shoe as I got closer and picking it up. I twisted the on switch, and sure enough, static sparked from the small speaker. It worked. I clicked the button. Hello? I let go of the button and waited for a response.
Well done.
A voice practically whispered through the static.
You've made it. 16.
Came the voice from the speaker, although this time it sounded less robotic, like someone didn't have time to ready their impersonation.
Halfway.
The transition stopped, and I was left with just static again. Hello? Who is this? What do you mean by that? I waited for a response, but got nothing. I continued to try to call out, but after a minute of no replies, I gave up. I clipped the device to my belt and turned to leave the room. I grabbed my shoes on the way out, figuring one of the doors must offer me an escape. I tried door number 4, locked. Door number 5, opened. I look out to find the stairwell again, or a different stairwell at least, probably leading down to the next level. I'm about to walk in when curiosity gets the best of me. What about door number 6?
15.
Another death. Some bastard was responsible for all of this. I opened the door and inside another custodial closet, this time with rope in it. Rope, the universal tool, something capable of doing just about anything. I took it and wrapped it around my shoulders. This would definitely come in handy.
14.
Another one already? I wondered to myself, what could have gotten them? If they were making a similar pace to what I would have been, could they be in the next room already? Was it really that bad?
13.
What? I started to worry. If it was something about the next room, then it must be an extra difficult challenge. I started getting nervous. To know that people in the same building as you were just dropping like flies and you weren't able to see it happen or do anything about it really puts your nerves on edge, especially when you know you're going to have to go through the same thing.
12.
Damn, this was getting ridiculous. I made my way down the stairwell and followed the stairway downwards to the next door. I glanced inside and saw another long hallway, this one longer than the one I had just been in. I had to really twist my head to get a look down to the end, but couldn't quite see that far. I gasped as I looked down where the doors across from me met the floor and saw not one but 2 dead bodies sprawled out below with what looked like arrows protruding from their chests, and one of them had it in the head. I turned away, feeling sick. I had seen dead bodies before, but the shock paired with the idea of having to go in there myself was making me nauseous. I pondered to myself about what I should do. I looked down the stairwell. The only way to get to the next floor was, as far as I knew, to go through the door and ride things out. I assumed there must be another door somewhere at the end of the hallway, but I'd probably be getting shot at the whole time. If I had a shield or something, I might stand a chance, but I don't remember seeing anything like that in any of the early rooms. As I looked down the center drop that would plummet a person straight to the bottom of the stairwell and meet with a nasty ending, I thought to myself, hey, maybe I could skip that section and scale to the next one by climbing down. This seems like the best idea. Safer than getting shot at by arrows, at least. I threw my legs over the railing and used what little upper body strength I had. I started making my descent. I held tight to the bars as I went down each rung one by one. As I reached the last one, I realized this wasn't as good an idea as I had thought it would be. I'd need to swing to the next section of stairs in an almost expert gymnast kind of way. If I swung too short, I'd land back first into the bars below me, probably break my back or some other bones, falling to my death through the center of the stairwell shortly after. If I didn't duck in time as I swung inwards, I'd probably hit my head, which would cause me to fall awkwardly and probably break something in the process.
11.
Dang it! I screamed as I nearly lost my grip from the shock of the alarm. I needed to do this now. I did a quick practice swing and let go. I prepared my legs, bent my knees. As I touched down hard on the cement surface, I felt my body weight pulling me backwards. As I found purchase, I fell back, but was braced by the railing behind me, thankfully. My head, unfortunately, met with the bar, and there was a sharp, searing pain through my body as my bruise was reminded to feel pain again. I hissed in agony, but reminded myself to be happy that at least I was still alive. I probably shouldn't try that method again. I looked around me. There was another door, leading to what I could only assume was another test. I needed to find a way to the bottom of this place. I wanted to leave. I looked down the stairwell center, imagining for a moment what my body would look like had I jumped and it was crumpled up on the floor at the bottom, had I not succeeded in my escapade just now. I shuddered at the thought. I counted roughly 4 or 5 more floors before I could see the end. I looked at the rope and wondered if it might afford me a shortcut that I was after. The rope was fairly thick, should be able to hold my body weight, but how far could it get me? I figured at least 2 or 3 floors would be better than none. I looped it around my waist, similar to what I'd seen done in movies. Then I moved to the railing, planning to tie off the end. I never got into the Boy Scouts, and I didn't have any sailing experience, so I wasn't incredibly familiar with knots, but I figured more or better, right? So I did a traditional knot, then I wrapped some of the rope's remainder around and did another. And then I repeated it one more just for safety, and then pulled back on it, even leaning my full body weight in hopes of some assurance it would hold. Sure enough, I didn't feel any give.
10.
Down to the final 10. I looked down and fear started to kick in. No matter how I did this, there was going to be a defining moment where I was going to have to just trust the rope. I climbed over the railing as I had before, making a slight knot around my waist that allowed the rope to slide through as I made my descent. I took a deep breath and let go. I clutched the rope that was tied off and felt my body weight and the force of gravity pull against it, but it held. I was hanging, suspended in air, not falling to my death. I took things slow, cautiously, allowing some of the rope to slide by as I slowly and steadily made my way down.
9.
I felt my grip loosen too much as the surprise from the sound blared and echoed through the stairwell, bouncing off the cement walls. I quickly regained my grip, but felt the sting of rope burns as the threads cut into my hand. I wondered how many people died thanks to that damn alarm. I continued to lower myself past the first section of stairs, then the second. It was slow moving, but the progress I was making made me smile. I could see that I definitely had enough rope for at least one more. Sure enough, I was soon eye to eye with the third section. I looked at how much rope I had left. It wasn't much, but I wondered if maybe it could get me a fourth. From there, I might be able to hop to the bottom. I couldn't see the floor of the building currently, but I knew I must be close enough that I could fall the rest of the way without fear of serious injury. Maybe. I slowly descended to section 4, keeping careful track of the amount of rope I had left. I focused on what I was doing, slid down till I had about a foot of rope left, and swung. Unlike last time, this was a much cleaner swing as the rope afforded me more leverage. I landed and maintained my posture as my feet hit the ground. I had made it. I excitedly looked over the barrier and could see the ground not too far away. So close, but I probably shouldn't risk jumping down. I turned to look at the door behind me. I guess I might as well take a peek.
8.
I just ignored the reminder. This door didn't feature a window in it, which made me hesitate. I could open this, and something could happen that ends me after all this effort and work I put myself through to get through this place. I gripped the handle, flinching as I thought about the electric door. It's quick, stupid decisions like this that killed that man. I need to think and take things slowly, like I had before. I hid behind the door and slowly cracked it open, ever so slightly. Nothing. A little more. Still nothing. I stepped fully behind the door and pulled it open all the way. Nothing. I carefully angled my head and peeked inside. I was so shocked by what I saw that I pulled back from behind the door. Inside the room were a half-dozen shotguns pointed straight at the door. It almost looked like they were connected by strings or something. I peeked again. They weren't going off, but I wasn't about to stand in front of them. I looked around the room. Sure enough, they did in fact have strings attached to them, straight to the triggers. Pulling the strings would set the gun off, but how were the strings supposed to get pulled? Additionally, I noticed that there was a wall of thin wires to ensure nobody got to where the guns were sitting at the ready, and also to allow the guns to fire through them. Very clever. I followed the strings up to the ceiling where they were on various pulleys and gears, and then came back down to a small box covered in buttons. It was pretty easy to understand the puzzle. Push the wrong button, one of the guns will fire. But what would the correct button give you? I noticed on the left side of the room there was a door. Of course, it too had a string attached to it that went up and mixed in with the others. There was no way to follow the string to the right button. They would often crisscross and even jumble together in an indecipherable mess. There had to be another solution. I wasn't keen on going into the room. Not until I could think of something. The thought of having multiple guns pointed at me while I was contemplating didn't seem like a method of conducting logical thought. The sound of multiple gunshots rang out throughout the entire building.
7.
Sounds like someone pushed the wrong button. As the ringing pain eventually left my ears, things became very quiet. The other 7 people, assuming they were in the same place I was, were probably trying to decide what to do based on the obvious failure on someone's part. I was strategizing as well. It was kind of odd how all the guns sounded like they all went off at the same time. Maybe the person had pressed them all for some reason? Why would they do that? It'd be a great strategy if you could find a way to do it while you're not standing in front of the guns. Something the now dead individual must not have thought of. Again, the sound of multiple gunshots blasted through the silence.
6.
There goes another one. I wondered how the mastermind behind this whole death trap building had managed to find so many guns and was willing to waste the ammo for this whole game. 6 guns firing together seemed a bit of a waste. I swung the door a couple times, testing its weight. Given the thickness and fact that it was metal, it could probably handle the buckshot without fear that the bullets would fly through. If I could set off the guns while the door was closed, then I should be safe. Another set of gunshots.
5.
If only I knew which buttons they were pushing. Although that didn't offer a promise that the button I needed was the same one that someone else needed. Kiro probably didn't want us to collaborate in any way. But just for safety, I took the walkie-talkie off my belt and turned it on. Is anyone there? Nothing but static. I gave it a couple of seconds, but there was no response, so I returned it back to my belt clip, leaving it on just in case someone did crackle through. Another set of gunshots. This was turning into the worst challenge yet.
4. 3.
Only 3 left. I was one of only 3 people in this building. Plus the killer himself, of course. Assuming he was working alone. So many deaths. For what? Some kind of sick game? I needed to make a move. No point in sitting here listening to people die. I took the walkie-talkie off my belt. This thing hadn't been doing me any good anyways. I walked to the other side of the door, the side where it opened at. I took the device in my hand and tossed it towards the box of buttons before quickly closing the door and crouching behind the wall, awaiting the sound of gunshots. I heard the thud of the talkie hitting the board. I heard a beep as one of the buttons was pressed. Silence. I waited for a moment, and suddenly I hear a metallic, as if a lock had been disengaged. Had I done it? Did my random toss just happen to hit the right button? I peeked inside. Nothing different than before, except that one of the lights on the buttons that I must have hit was blinking. No way. I guess after everything else I've managed to survive today, I had to have a lucky break at some point. I took one of the flashlights out and tossed it into the room. Nothing happened. No motion sensors or whatnot that was waiting for me to walk in before shooting me. Surely the killer wasn't a sore loser. I took my first precautious step inside. Nothing happened. I was practically slinking along the wall, pulling myself into the room little by little. Nothing happened. Finally, I was fully in the room, and the door was shutting behind me. I bent down to pick up the flashlight I had tossed in. Still nothing. My breathing was deep, and my heartbeat was rapid, as I ever so slowly made my way towards the door.
2.
I slowly opened my eyes. I was still standing. I felt my body. No gunshots. I was still alive. It must have been one of the other rooms. I must have chose the wrong button. I practically chuckled, not out of the idea that someone was dead. I'm not a psychotic like whoever trapped us here. I just found it funny that I honestly thought that I had been killed. Enough distractions. I needed to keep my head on straight. I stared intently at the ground, even shining my flashlight before stepping to see if I caught some glimmer of any kind of invisible string that might be in the cause of all this carnage. Nothing. In what seemed like a year's time, I finally found myself at the exit door. I sighed with relief, pulled my shirt sleeve down my hand, and gently touched the handle in case of electricity. No burns. I reached out and took the handle, ready for it to still be locked, but sure enough, the handle turned all the way. I stood frozen at the door. Only one person, besides myself, was alive in here. The melancholy feeling brought on by this realization made my movements slow. I gently pulled the door. I froze. Something was straining the door from opening. There was some sort of pullback that I couldn't place. It wasn't coming from behind the door, like someone was trying to hold it closed or something. More like something was attached to the door. It had give to it, nothing that would stop me from flinging the door open all the way. And that's when I noticed A hidden string that was attached to the other side of the handle was running up to the ceiling and down into the mess of shotguns. It was never about the buttons. They were a decoy, a red herring. That's why all the guns were going off at the same time. The people got confident, pulled the door, and bang, that was the end. I immediately let go of the handle, the crack in the door mocking me at how close I was to escaping this nightmare. But now that I knew the trick, it should be easy to work around. I took my belt off and carefully tied it to the knob and made my way to the door I came in from. Too short, of course. I took off my shirt, tied it to the belt. That was enough. I was safely outside the room, closed the door, and pulled on my shirt as if it was a ripcord on a lawnmower. I waited a moment until my ears stopped ringing before I looked inside. 6 pillars of smoke rose from the shotguns in the room, and the door awaited me wide open. I sighed with relief and chuckled to myself. I'm sure the other survivor was probably really confused right now about the lack of number following the gunshots. I stepped inside the room, and the smell of ignited gunpowder met my nose, stinging it with its crisp, sharp scent. I walked confidently towards the door when something interrupted my stride.
Very clever.
It was the voice I had heard earlier, the only time I got a response from that walkie-talkie, which now laid on the floor. A small chunk of its plastic was missing, probably taken off by a piece of buckshot. I scoffed at it and walked towards the door. If the only person it would let me talk to was the killer, then I had nothing to say. I was greeted by the all-familiar view of another stairwell, leading me downwards. I strutted down and was pleasantly surprised to find the front lobby of what seemed to be a business or office building, as I had predicted before. I sighed with relief as I saw the glass door at the front where sunlight was shining through. Freedom. I looked about me and saw no present danger. Nothing that suggested any kind of further test. I cautiously walked towards the door, checking them for any strings or cables. With one final sigh, I pushed them open. A tear rolled down my cheek as I was greeted by the soft, gentle breeze and sweet scent of nature beckoning me with the freedom it offered. I took one last look behind me and noticed a large sign hanging just above the front desk. It was set up like a birthday banner. Welcome to Tower Trials. Well, what the heck was that? Was this some sort of competition bit? I spit behind me before walking out the door. Disgusting. I saw my stuff waiting for me, which was almost eerie as I exited the building. I started to gather it all up and prepared to leave the area, never planning to return to this region again. I put on a replacement shirt, threw my coat over my back. As I placed one of the new flashlights I still had into the coat's pocket, I felt something unfamiliar inside. The first item was a piece of paper that simply read,
Thank you for participating in Tower Trials. Know that you have made someone very happy today.
I didn't even want to know what that meant. I tossed the paper and reached back in. There was something else. A small sack of currency inside. A reward for surviving. This is what my life was worth to them, apparently. I pushed it back into my pocket and began to walk away.